Welcome, Comadres and friends. I am Tess Tobin, Project Manager of the Las Comadres National Latino Book Club. The leadership team is pleased to have you join us for tonight's teleconference as we are in our 19th year. It has been our privilege to support Latina authors throughout these 19 years, and we look forward to many more years to come. We'd also like to extend a warm welcome to readers following us on our live Twitter chat at Read Latino Lit. Tonight, please help us welcome authors Caridad Pineiro and Stephanie Elizondo Griest. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping notes. Please keep yourselves on mute. You can keep your videos on. We do suggest that you put yourself on speaker mode, but gallery works just as well. If you have any questions or comments, please put them in the chat and we will try to get to them. So let's start with our book club's history. Comadre Nidia?
Okay, bienvenidos, bienvenidas, comadres and friends. My name is Nidia Marcela and I'm the book club membership coordinator. Our book club began in July 2004 in the apartment of Maria Ferrer here in New York City. But after a brief pause, Nora Comstock reimagined and relaunched the organization nationwide. Her vision was to promote Latina authors, bring our community into bookstores, and support our writers. In October of 2006, we began hosting teleconferences. And now, in our 19th year, we continue to share work by Latina authors with book lovers everywhere. Our book club and teleconferences are designed to encourage everyone, not just Latinos, to read more Latina literature, explore diverse cultural perspectives, and gain deeper insight into Latino root and heritage. We are creating a space where readers can explore the rich inner world of Latino writers through their written work. We currently have book clubs in 12 cities across different time zones. And we invite you to join a local chapter that fits your schedule. If your city isn't represented, we welcome your help in starting a new club. For more information, visit our website, Latino Lit. I will put that in the chat. So please spread the word and invite others to join our literally community. Comadre Karen, take it away.
Welcome, comadres and friends, to our August 2025 Zoom teleconference. I'm Karen Gonzalez, Assistant Coordinator for the Las Comadres and Friends Book Club, Denver Comadres Book Club Facilitator, and co-founder of the Colorado Alliance of Latino Mentors and Authors. Thank you for joining us tonight. Our first interview is with Caridad Pineiro, a transplanted Long Island girl who has fallen in love with the Jersey Shore. When Caridad isn't taking long strolls along the boardwalk, she's also a New York Times and USA Today best-selling author with over 1 million romance novels sold worldwide. She is a founding member of the Liberty States Fiction Writers and has presented workshops at the RT Book Club Convention, Romance Writers of America National Conference, as well as various writing organizations throughout the country. Interviewing Caridad is Comadre Maria Ferrer, the Executive Director of Las Comadres para las Americas. Take it away, Comadre Maria.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Caridad, for being here with us. We're very excited. This is her beautiful color. Look how beautiful that is. And it's such a good size. I was telling her, now that I'm getting a little bit older and stuff, I need this new big font so I can see. But the book was wonderful. Let's start off with, give us a little synopsis about this book, One Summer Night, and tell us about Maggie and Owen.
Well, thank you, Maria. And it's funny, I remember doing events with you back in 2004 when you first started the book club. It's a lot of fun. This was actually the first book in a trilogy that was called The At the Shore. contemporary romance series. And One Summer Night was actually a Publisher's Weekly top 10 pick in their fall year when it was released. It's a fun story about enemies to lovers. You know, we use a lot of trope language in the romance world. Basically, Maggie is a woman who is struggling to keep her family's retail store business alive, and Owen is a man whose father owns a real estate development company, and he would like nothing better than the stores to fold, so that his, you know, the father would like that, not Owen. You know, Owen is very much attracted to Maggie, would love to see her do well. And it's also kind of a marriage of convenience. It's a fun kind of beach read story. But inside, there's a lot about family and friends. Maggie has a diverse group of friends. Connie, who is her right-hand lady who helps her with everything and happens to be a Cuban-American attorney, much like me. I base a lot of the settings for One Summer Night, not only on some of the towns here on the shore, but also in New York City, on places where I worked. So for example, Connie and Maggie both work in the Chrysler Building, which is one of my favorite buildings of all time in New York City. So you get to feel a lot of the atmosphere of what it's like for people to move from living in the city to coming down to the shore, as they say. They say that here. It's very funny. We always used to say just go to the beach on Long Island, but they say they go down the shore in Jersey. It's one of those idioms, but you know, it's full of you know, a very strong family feel. The two families, Maggie and Owen's families, have been estranged for quite some time, and unfortunately, the kids are caught up in that estrangement. So it is all about fixing that and restoring peace to the families, and helping each other to succeed and save stores. The store in that Maggie's retail store is based on was actually based, for those of you who are a little bit older like I am, on B. Altman and Company, which used to be one of the big Fifth Avenue stores. I mean, just a gorgeous building. Actually, and if you go, it's on the corner of 34th and 5th. It's a landmark building, so the building itself is still there. But my dad worked in the store and I worked in the store. So a lot of that that you see in the book is based on my fondness for that store and basically growing up in it from when I was a little kid, and we would visit my dad and, you know, go there for Christmas, you know, to sit with Santa and everything else. So the book very much is a beach book, but also brings you through the holiday season and just gives you a flavor of what New York City is like for all different kinds of people.
No, I loved it, the way that you go back and forth. And so I had a very big like Romeo and Juliet, Hatfield and McCoy's sort of vibe, you know, the enemies to lovers trope. And so when you were writing and creating this story, who came first? Like the characters, the feud, the beach?
For me, it's always the characters. Every story I write, the characters come first. And I actually, and it's really funny, a lot of times, I would say 90% of the time, it's the female characters that come first to me. I want to have strong female heroines who can determine their own fates. And that's slightly different from the romances that I first was reading, you know, in the 70s and 80s, where they were very much driven by whatever was going on with the hero. I absolutely wanted something different with that. So the three women who form this trilogy of In the At the Shore, Maggie, Connie, and Emma, are all very strong-minded women who know what they want, and are out to achieve certain goals. And the romance is there, but it's very much about them completing their journey. So very much it was Maggie, and I did want to have like a Romeo and Juliet kind of story to start with. It would just seem to fit what I wanted to do, and it seemed to also be something that just felt right for this particular character. and kind of set the scene for the next two books. Because as you could tell, reading it, then Connie is very much a confidant to Maggie, and her story is next. So it very much sets up Connie's story. The hero's brother, Owen, appears in this story as his confidant, and he is the hero in the second story. He seems to be a ne'er-do-well who's actually made it quite big. And in the second book, What Happens in Summer, it's all about whether or not that character has changed, and whether or not he's really a man who somebody could actually count on. So it's fun exploring the different stories and how the romances happen and the very different characters. Because I think one of the hard things, I've written almost 80 books now, and it's really hard to make sure that each of those characters, both the heroes and heroines, are unique, that they have a unique story. And I think a lot of people feel that, oh, romance is formulaic, when we say there's a trope. Well, it's not really formulaic, because all of the stories are different. There may be some similarities. And if I use the shorthand for a romance reader and I say it's an enemy's lover, it's a second chance, it's grumpy sunshine, those are things that they recognize. But even though they recognize those elements, each of the stories has to be unique. So, for me, that's an important thing. And again, after that many books, you really try to take the time to craft these characters are going to be different. And the romances that are going to be different and fit each of those characters as the rest of the story develops in the books.
Well, I want to ask you about your 80 books, but first I want to ask you, a few of our members wanted to know more about Owen and Jonathan's mom, and if she was going to show up further in the series. For me, I wanted to make sure that, the father got his, because he's such a shit to Owen and Maggie. And I'm thinking that he should, as a good gesture of good faith, he should pay off all her loans, as I'm sorry, such a B to you. So
Yeah.
mom and dad, are they coming up a little bit more in the next book or so?
That was something that a lot of readers were asking me, even as I was, having finished writing the book. And it was very important for me because Owen was obviously, the responsible one and the one who kind of just did everything to please his father until he stands up for Maggie, right? And that's what happens in the first book. And Jonathan is the one who ran off, again, seemed to be the ne'er-do-well, and comes back as a very accomplished, successful man. But he has this one big, gaping emotional wound, and that is, why did their mother leave? What was it that happened with their mom, and why would she just leave them? It's something that's really shaped his life and shaped his relationship with Connie in the second book, right? But as the book develops, you see him planting roots, things that he's never been able to do. Something as simple as adopting a dog, and when he does that in the second book and What Happens in Summer. And yes, you do get to find out what happened and what, you find out about the rift at the end of One Summer Night, what actually, caused it. But in the second book, you definitely get to see what happens with the mom. And I think you have a very emotional resolution that really, I mean, readers responded to it quite well, and loved that there was this satisfaction of not only knowing, but seeing something joyous come about at the end of that book.
Mm-hmm. I have to say, I did read book 2. Yes, I was very. I'm still waiting for the dad to pay the loans. So I wanted to ask you, why do you think romance novels are so popular, that they're so eternal? Because let's face it, romance novels have been around for a very long time. They continue to be popular. They continue to be $1 billion business. They're not going out of style. So why do you think, there's that passion for these romance novels?
Well, I think I mean, it is like, I think now it's nearly a $2 billion industry. And basically, let's face it, romance novels float all the rest of the industry, because you couldn't have all these big literary books and everything unless there was money in the pocketbooks, to pay for them. Because a lot of them have very minor, in comparison, smaller print runs than, romance novels do. So it's really the romance novels that kind of generate a lot of the money, for the publishing houses. But I think it's just that they're happy. I mean, when you talk formula, what has to happen at the end of a romance novel. It's not a romance novel unless the two people get together. And I say two people because one of the things about romance, it's been one of the most accepting of, not only gay romances, but interracial romances. Our goal is that at the end of the book, people are going to be happy. They're going to, in my mind, find a partner who's going to support them, who's going to help them move on in their lives. And I think we like to see that. Women like to see that. I'm not going to say that men aren't emotional, but I think women very much are more in tune with their emotions, and they more responsive to seeing those emotions and those relationships in the books they read, especially because romances have progressed as women have progressed. The romance heroines of today's novels are nothing like the romance heroines of novels from 30, 40, or 50 years ago. Women are strong, they're independent, they know what they want, and they know how to go after it. And I think that's reflected in modern romances. So I think that the reason the romance, industry is still so strong is that it has moved with the times, it has grown with the times, and that women do see themselves in some of these roles. And again, they see that happily ever after, and they appreciate love being shown, hopefully in a positive way. I'm not going to say that there aren't dark romances and other things like that, where romance has taken a turn in a direction I may not personally like. But the point is, I think women still identify with them very much. And again, it's one way to just kind of read them and escape. And I don't want to say it's all escapist because, at the shore stories, and in all of my stories, there's a takeaway about something bigger than just the romance. Because I think that's an important thing, that every book maybe highlights something that makes you think about a topic, and, possibly open your eyes to seeing something differently.
Mhm. One thing that I really liked about your book is that you see the hustle of New York, and the glamour of New York and everything, and then you see the calmness of Sea Kiss at the shore and all this stuff. But what I like about it is that you make New York seem like a big small town. You know, I
Yeah.
didn't get I didn't get lost in the craziness that is New York that I live in all the time, but it felt like a big small town, you know? There was a community, there was connection and stuff. I mean, they find their relaxing and their peace at the shore and stuff, but you make New York seem so nice.
Yeah, well, I do portray New York in a very nice way, and which it was for many, many years, except for the recent turns it's taken. Um, but it's funny when they bought the books originally, they were all set in New York because my goal was to show exactly what you caught on to, is that New York is really a conglomeration of small towns, because the feel of Midtown, like 42nd Street and where I was on the East Side, is very different from the Upper West Side, is very different from Spanish Harlem, very different from, Riverside, Heights, very different from Murray Hill, you know what I'm saying? And Chelsea and
Different.
Tribeca. It really is a collection of small little neighborhoods, that kind of form this huge city, and every little neighborhood kind of has its flavor. You have Koreatown, right? And you have Little Brazil, and you have all of these areas. And originally, the books were supposed to be set in these different areas. And of course, then you have the boroughs, right? Because we didn't even talk about them. You know, most people think of New York, especially if we live in New York, we think of New York as Manhattan, right? But the publisher, when we first were working on them, really wanted there to be an even bigger difference, which is why they asked me to introduce the Jersey Shore. And the other thing I wanted to introduce was obviously that there are Latinos and a lot of diverse people, even along some places that you normally don't imagine picturing them. There's a very huge Latino population in all of the little towns that I live in Monmouth County. And I wanted to show that as well, that we are presence in many places,
Yes, your books have from the very beginning, you have always been you've always highlighted Latino characters, and they may be like the secondary character in one book, but then they get their own book and they become the primary characters. And that's good to see because, it's true, Latinos and any ethnicity, we like to be represented, and yes, we love all those books, about Barbies and, Karens and all those
Yeah.
stuff. We want to see, the Connies, the Consuelos, the Marias, the Carmens, we want to see them too. And we want them
Yeah.
to also get their happy ending. So thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
no, very sure. I think out of all my books, I would say at least 85% of my books have
Mhm.
Latino characters of one ethnicity or the other, although I generally tend to do either Cubans or Mexicans because I am Cuban. And I spent a lot of time in Mexico, so I hope I can portray some of that culture accurately. But I wouldn't take on a culture that I didn't know because that wouldn't be fair to do.
Mhm. Now, tell us about your new series, The Crooked Pass Security.
Oh yeah, look, that's
Right.
funny. Look. It's so hard with this virtual screen. This is a spin-off, actually. Harlequin, we did a series called South Beach Security, which featured a Cuban American family that runs a security agency in Miami and solves all kinds of crimes. And we actually had a canine spin-off because dogs are very popular in
Yes.
romance. It's really crazy. People just love it. When I start talking about dogs and how I put them in the stories and everything. It's really funny to watch their reactions. I am not a dog person. I have a cat, but I borrow my sister's dogs to try the training tricks and everything. So we had 4 books in the South Beach Security series. We had the 4 books in the Canine spinoff, which was a lot of fun. I said a lot of things in Florida, and that was very nice for readers because a lot of the books in the Harlequin world don't take places in don't take place in like Florida in these areas. They have a tendency to be on ranches in Texas and out in Wyoming and all that, the Pacific Northwest. For some reason, the readers really like those locations. So it was fun to be able to pull them out of those locations and show them areas in Florida they might not know about. Now, what happens is that 2 of the people in that family are actually half Cuban, half Anglo. And the Anglo side happens to hail from Colorado. So when we were talking about what to do with a new series, and there's going to be 4 books in the Crooked Pass series, we decided to move it to Denver. I know somebody mentioned they were from Denver earlier.
Karen's from Denver.
Karen, there you go. So Crooked Pass takes place. They're set in Denver. They actually are around the corner from the Capitol, right next to the 16th Street pedestrian mall. These are tech geniuses who found this agency, and they're going to help investigate a bunch of different crimes. There are dogs in the books because people love dogs. And I actually just signed a contract to do another spin-off of this series for another 3 books. That's going to be all about solving cold cases. So very excited. Harlequin has always been fantastic for me. I think I've been with almost all of the major publishers, but really, I just love working with them.
Mm-hmm. And you were talking about how you have written about 80 books, and you've
Right.
written basically every genre. You've had mysteries, you had historicals, contemporaries, vampires. We love the
Yeah,
vampires and
we
stuff.
love
So
the vampires.
it seems like now you're leaning towards the thrillers, the mysteries, the intrigues. Is that what you're doing now?
Yeah, I'm writing romantic suspense, which actually when we first did the book club in 2004, you were highlighting my vampire series, which was actually vampire suspense. So that's the suspense has been a very strong element in a lot of the works that I did, and I wrote that for over a decade in addition to some other romantic suspense stories. So I'm writing romantic suspense right now with intrigue. I've had some work. I've been doing some wanted to do a women's fiction. It's a very crowded market, and unfortunately, we haven't been able to place the women's fiction book. But I probably will write it in my spare time and publish it on my own because I really want to tell that story. And then I'm also hoping to sell a bigger book, a bigger thriller book that has, a longer story in it with a subplot and all those things. So that's what I'm working on. And, I love writing. I can't believe that I think September, it's 26 years since my first book came out.
Wow.
So somehow I've managed to keep going in this crazy industry.
Yeah. So our time is almost up. I just have one final question. So, how does it feel to know that your daughter is following in your footsteps? Because Samantha has a book
yeah.
out.
She actually has 2 full-length books, 4 novellas, and her birthday is the 27th, and she's releasing a new book on the 27th, which is a romantasy. It's so exciting to see that.
Like daughter.
I mean, she's written more books at 30. She's going to be 36. Maybe she doesn't want me to tell people that. She's written more books at that age than I did and had them, published them. And she's doing very well for herself doing that. And the best part is that we get to go to these book events together and spend time together doing something that we love. So I'm very proud of her that she's, chasing her dream of doing this. And she's got beyond that book, she's got another one she's going to re-release. She's got a couple of more novellas in that series that she's doing. And her plan is hopefully to one day be a full-time writer, and I'm all for her. I'm going to back her any way I can. So it's very exciting. And you can see her website is koreanfromcontext.com. And she writes under the name Samantha Ann. You could find her books.
Well, thank you for joining us. And do let us know about, the rest of the books in your series and everything. And good luck.
And thank you so much for having me. It's a delight to always be with you.
All right. Thank you. Comadre Karen.
Gracias, comadres. Our second interview is with Stephanie Elizondo Griest, a globe-trotting writer from the Texas-Mexico borderlands. Her 6 books include Around the Block, My Life in Moscow, Beijing, and Havana, Mexican Enough, All the Agents and Saints, Art Above Everything. Her work has won a Margolis Award for Social Justice Reporting, an International Latino Book Award, a Penn Southwest Book Award, and 2 Lowell Thomas Travel Journalism Prizes. Professor of Creative Nonfiction at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, she has performed as both a moth storyteller and as a literary ambassador for the U.S. State Department. Interviewing Stephanie is Lourdes J. Rodriguez, Dr. Ph.D., a national public health leader who serves as Chief Executive Officer of the David Rockefeller Fund. Her 25-year career spans work in academia and philanthropy, leading initiatives that bring people together to solve challenges they face collectively. Dr. Rodriguez previously served as a senior program officer with Austin, Texas-based St. David's Foundation, one of the country's largest health foundations, investing more than $80 million annually across Central Texas. She was born and raised in Puerto Rico and moved to the continental U.S. in 1996. She lives in Austin, Texas with her husband and children. Take it away, Comadre Lourdes.
Mil gracias. Oh, it's so exciting to be here tonight. And I have to say, I'm having a reading rainbow moment. So, if I start gushing, you know why it is. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for this beautiful book, Art Above Everything. This is a great book that is part biography, part anthology of biographies, part investigative journalism, but most importantly, it's a book full of heart, and it is a call to lead an artful life, I would say. Before I dive with my questions, I wanna set us up for an audience participation bit. So as Stephanie and I are in conversation, I want to invite you to think about the role of art in your life. And this is inspired by 3 questions that Mama Mihirangi, one of the artists featured in the book, asked herself. And the questions are, who am I? What do I want to do? And what are the tools that I need to do that? So at the end of the conversation, I want to invite you to add your responses to these questions in the chat. I also want to say thank you to folks who sent some questions in advance, and I did my best at weaving those throughout the conversation. And with that, let's dive right in. Thank you for being here, Stephanie.
Oh, it's such an honor. Thank you.
Your book features the stories of about 25 mujeres artistas that include dancers and painters and performers, writers, and many other mujeres who were witnesses, students, participants. We're curious, how did you find them? How did you, identify them?
How did I identify them? Yes. Well, first of all, it's such a joy to be in conversation with you. Thank you so much for reading the book with so much care and intent. And so Art Above Everything is a book. Basically, every book that I write is an answer to a question that haunts me. And the question that has haunted me probably the most in the longest period of time is art enough? And I have walked my life, every time I reach a crossroads, I tend to take the path of most resistance, which is the path of being a writer, just time and time again. And I did this in literally every way possible, from leaving relationships that were likely heading toward marriage and children and family and houses and, all the things, because I was working on a book project, because my book project was always my first love, to leaving job opportunities, just so many different times in my life, I have always chosen the creative path. And by the time I reached 40, I began to start to realize the legacy of having chosen the path of most resistance. And by that point, I was very lucky to have been able to get a what people sometimes refer to as a real job, which is to be a professor at UNC Chapel Hill. So finally, for the first time in my life, I then had reliable income, health insurance, and I was able to sort of subsidize my writing passion and joy. But I began to realize that I looked around at the other people who were my age, and they had all made, quite different choices in their own life. And I just started feeling a little developmentally stagnant. And so I started thinking, like, if I'm going to continue doing this, I need to find other women like me. So this was sort of my existential dilemma when I turned 40. Where can I find other women who have also done this? And so that is what began this project. And women, so to answer the actual question, these women came to me in so many different ways. The first group of women who came into my life, I actually arrived into their space. And so that is Nurit Ugram. They are a classical Indian dance troupe, a couple of hours south of Bangalore. And I was lucky to get an artist residency. And so I lived in community with them for a month. And these women, there are 2 dancers there. One has since left, but the main woman I focus on, Surupa Sen, has been dancing from sun up to sundown every single day for about 30 years now, about as long as I've been a writer. And so she just had such profound insight into the life that in the book, I kind of coined this term, art monk. And so, sort of like, Catholic monks choose, chastity, poverty, obedience. They walk
all
that
the things,
path.
all the things, yeah.
All those things. I'm like, what is so different from how I'm living my life, right? So So, and realizing why she chose these things for similar reasons that I did, right? For her, it was an act of profound devotion. And so that just sort of opened me up to realizing if I'm going to be this, if I'm going to stay in this monastery, this art monastery, then I need to hear other chanters in the dark. So I started looking for other chanters in the dark. So in one instance, I literally moved in with them unwittingly and spent a month with them. Other were a couple of guests that came to UNC Chapel Hill.
Right.
Other times were women that I really intentionally had the idea that I wanted to write about a woman who had a particular kind of experience. I really wanted women from all regions of the world. I wanted all the major religions to be represented. I wanted all the major languages to be represented. I wanted someone who made art in relation to genocide, which is how I went to Rwanda.
Yeah.
I wanted someone who had experienced war. I wanted someone who had experienced, just totalitarianism, which is why I went to Romania. I also wanted to interview women from Iceland because according to the World Economic Forum, Icelandic women, they live in a society that is 91% patriarchy free.
I was surprised to read that.
Yes. So that's the most empowered place to be a woman. So I really wanted an Indigenous woman, and particularly my last book, All the Ancients and Saints, is half based in the Mohawk Nation of Akwesasne. While working on that book, I continuously found references to the Maori as being one of the most empowered Indigenous communities we have. It's also a traditionally matriarchal culture. So I knew then, I have to interview a Maori woman. And then I just, did some research and found an extraordinary one. So yeah, that's sort of how it went about.
Yeah, and you even had your own madrina there.
I also had, the only person who I knew without a shadow of a doubt, as soon as I came up with this idea for a book project, I'm like, and I will interview Sandra Cisneros. So there is a chapter about La Sandra, the madrina to all writers everywhere. Yeah.
That's awesome. One of the sentences that stayed with me was, I believed in people's stories. What does it mean to you to believe in people's stories?
Yeah. That is what I have devoted the majority of my life to, is listening to people's stories. That goes all the way back to when I was a student in Moscow. I studied at the Moscow Linguistics Institute when I was 21 years old. I arrived in Moscow in 1996 after the collapse of the Soviet Union, 5 years after the collapse. Chechen War was raging, the ruble was falling. It was such an intensely difficult moment to be a Muscovite. And there was very obvious and evident suffering in the streets. I could see, I remember once I was walking in the middle of a blizzard down the street, and a manhole in the middle of the street lifted up and children ran out of it.
Wow.
So I saw just extreme challenges living there, and I began feeling guilty. Why am I here? What am I doing? Why am I taking up space in the metro? And in looking around, I tried to think about, well, what could I bring here? I'm not a doctor, I'm not a lawyer, I'm 21 years old, my skill set is limited, but I was studying journalism at UT Austin. And so I thought, well, that's the skill I can bring to this. I can take notes. And so it started off at night. I would just sit down on my cot in my dormitory, and I would just think, what did I see today? What did I smell today? What did I touch? What did I taste? And so it started just with these senses, 10 minutes a day, that over the course of the year that I lived in Moscow became longer and longer and longer. Then I began thinking, well, it's not such a large leap to go from what did I overhear today? What were the women gossiping about in the metro?
Right.
To, well, what if I turn around and ask them a question? What if I actually say, can I take you out for a cup of coffee and maybe we can actually talk about something? So over the course of my life, I've probably interviewed upward of about 800 people now. It never gets old. And in fact, I just find the more I interview, the more I must. It's really just become this lifelong endeavor for me. And I feel like my role in the world is to bear witness.
Finding that the thing that you're called to do is at the heart of each one of the stories of all the mujeres that you portray, that you talk about, that you spend time with. So thank you so much for that. I have to say that, oh my gosh, the amount of technical language that you include in each chapter. Like, and not only the amount of technical language, but also like at no point did I feel stupid reading the book, because I'm like, oh, you use these terms in ways that like I can understand what you're talking about. In the descriptions were rich. So I can only imagine the amount of research that you must have done. Can you talk a little bit about that process, the process of, you know, becoming acquainted with all of the like technical language, and then infusing that throughout each one of the chapters?
Yes, yes, yes. So this was a 10-year book project, 10 years. So Caridad, when you say you've written 80 books, that just really blows my mind. You know? So my whole, at my rate, I will maybe write 8. Because each of the books I've written have taken about, with the exception of a couple, but my 4 main books have each taken a decade to do. And this was hands down the most ambitious of my books, because I am writing about, each chapter is a different country. Each chapter is about multiple different women, and each chapter is about a different art form, none of which are my own. So for example, I wrote about actors in a theater troupe making art in Rwanda about the genocide.
Yeah.
Before I can even go to Rwanda, I need to have a really intimate understanding of the genocide, which is a really incredibly challenging thing to research. Just in the heart, it's very difficult to absorb this kind of information. So, you know, saw so many documentaries, read so many books, I interviewed people, historians. You know, I really wanted to get an understanding, first of all, of just the context of what the people I'm about to write about have been through. Then it's like, then I have to like learn about theater, right? And it's very particular kind of theater. And then it's like these larger contexts. So literally, like, there are very, very few sentences in this book that I did not have to research at least one thing, and sometimes 5 things, for every sentence, which is why it took years and years and years of my life. It was insanity. And also need to then, as you said, you know, write about it in a way that someone who did not spend all of that time will understand what I'm doing. Because I also don't want to sound like a historian or an academic. I want to sound like a memoirist, just talking to my girlfriends. Yeah.
And you did it, and it was beautiful. And I will admit, I kept finding myself like Googling these mujeres, because I wanted to see them moving the way that you described the, you know, belly dancers, and like the way that the connection to the earth. I just wanted to see it, because you were painting these pictures that I could see it with my mind's eye, but I wanted to see it. So I have to say, like, I Googled almost every.
Oh yeah.
It was awesome. So I jokingly, I said to Stephanie that maybe there should be like a companion multimedia something that accompanies the book. But that's another project that somebody else can undertake. I want to talk about this other common theme that one of your dancers, Surupa Sen, you mentioned her earlier, she called Raza with an S.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that experience between the audience and the artist. And Mama Mihirangi uses the expression "that one moment." And I have to admit that I was a little bit not only curious, but also envious and longing to have some of that myself. So could you talk a little bit more about what this means to you, though, having that one moment, and have you ever had
the moment? Yeah, the moment. It's really addictive, which is why people become art monks and why people make these really extreme sacrifices, because it is in Surupa Sen actually has the best description for it. She literally calls it a spiritual orgasm. And
I'll take that over.
Yeah. So what that means is you put something out energetically into your audience that they receive, and their whole body alights. So maybe you've had this experience being at maybe like a concert or something, you know, when all the little arm hairs just go blink. That's sort of how the audience sort of experiences, or just like feeling this kind of like elevated, escalated, you know, joy, verb, you know, you just feel, and then you start to suddenly feel really connected with everyone around you. You know, I think what's one of the reasons why Taylor Swift is really popular, right? Because she's really like this expert in rasa, and she makes the entire audience feel profoundly connected. You know, I'm a big U2 fan. Like, I've seen U2, you know, every couple of decades, multiple times over every decade that, you know, since I've been a kid, right? U2 really makes this massive stadium, you know, we all just like alight with it, right? So as a performer, when you can learn how to tap into that energy, it's like you put something out, the energy gets recycled through the crowd and it comes back to you. And then it's, you know, it is so extraordinary. It is such a sacred moment of communion. And so Indian dance actually has a term for it, which is rasa. But every single person I interviewed in every context, they all are on this, they're all in this quest to connect in this meaningful way. And so a lot of people use the word like vibration, you know, we're on this like vibration or something of this sort. And I've experienced this as a speaker, you know, when I do my readings, there are moments when suddenly like it's like I'm suddenly getting into it. And it's just this ecstasy that when yet one more reason why I've devoted my life to this.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah. All right, so I don't want to go to a dark place, but I have to ask you about another theme, and that's the theme of trauma.
Yeah.
You referenced that a little earlier when you talked about the Rwanda genocide. So there's the trauma of poverty also, and the trauma of dictatorship, and the trauma of sexual abuse. And sometimes women use that trauma as rationale for creating, as fuel, right? Like they used the trauma in different ways. And to me, that was a very different way of talking about trauma. Like sometimes trauma shows up in art as voyeurism. And so I would love your thoughts on that continuum from like trauma, like the treatment of trauma as a with the capacity to heal on one
Yes.
end versus like this voyeuristic treatment of trauma.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I think one really key thing that's separating the two is agency. And so these are women who have experienced a trauma and they're taking agency over the trauma by turning it into art. So Sandra Cisneros has this wonderful term for what the traumas of our life are. She calls them espinas, right? And they stuck, lobbed into our skin. And they release toxin, they release poison that over the course of your life will turn you bitter.
Tragic.
Really like it poisons your body, right? These things. And so how do we get it out? You know, therapy, there are multiple ways of getting it out, of extracting these espinas from us, but and also many ways to do it. No judgment of which way you choose to do it.
Yeah.
Art is a really powerful way to remove these espinas. Okay. So by writing your way out of this, by dancing your way, singing your way, acting your way, painting your way, sculpting your way out of removing these objects, and because that gives you the agency for it, then you render some beautiful object, then can give catharsis to your audience, your readers, your spectators, you know, whoever it is that interacts with this art. And that is that's when it actually begins to leave you. So certainly without a question, the traumas of my life, by virtue of writing about them, that is how I've been able to move through them and past them and beyond them. And so that's what's so extraordinary about Hope Azeda, the woman I write about in Rwanda, who does theater about the genocide. Not only, so once she saw this model really working very well in Rwanda, and she moved there right after the genocide, within like a couple of years of the genocide, and she lost most of her family. She lost brothers. I mean, she really lost a lot of people. So it was an extraordinary act of courage for her to return to, and she actually grew up in a refugee camp in Uganda. And anyway, to return to Rwanda was such an enormous act of courage. And once she found this way of moving through this, she then has devoted her life now to, she's the founder and director of the Ubuntu Festival, and that is bringing artists from any country that has experienced genocide in its past to come together and move through their art form in front of an audience that's actually takes place in the Kigali Genocide Memorial. So they are literally making art on top of the remains of 250,000 interred bodies, people who died in the genocide in the Kigali area. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing us hope, literally and metaphorically.
Totally. She's so much hope.
So, all right. So last question.
Yeah.
And a reminder that as soon as we're done with this conversation, we're inviting folks to answer the 3 questions of who am I, what do I want to do, and what are my tools to do that. All right, so in 10 years, this is not just like any 10 years, right? Like together, it almost seems like we have experienced many lifetimes, right? So in the way that you write, you weave the present with flashbacks, with hindsight moments, with premonitions. And it's almost like taking a trip on a TARDIS and going back through time and space for the Whovians in the room. But since the moment you put the pen down or turn off the computer and finish that last chapter, it seems like even more has happened. And it hasn't even been like, what, 2 years? So,
But yeah,
you
not
know,
even a year.
not
Yeah.
even a year, right? You wrote, if academia falls, a considerable portion of our creative class will vanish. And I think that we find ourselves in that moment that you warned us about, right? Funding for the arts has been threatened at best and cut at worst. There is editing of art collections, of history, picking and choosing whose version of story is valid. So can you help us understand how can art help us in this moment?
Yeah, thank you for that. So that's a real gift of this book has been learning modes of survival from these incredible women who have experienced everything. So I'm finding myself thinking back again and again to the extraordinary. I interviewed, I think, let's see, maybe 8 or 9 visual artists in Romania, and so Romania endured a terrible, terrible authoritarian dictator named Nicolae Ceausescu. It lasted about 27 years. And he controlled every aspect of life, of public life, down to the temperature of the thermostat, down to the number of calories you could get because, you know, the rations were so minimal.
Right.
He used all of the marble of the country, like just mined and mined and mined, took all the, from the mountains, and so that people couldn't even have marble for their headstone, their tombstone in the cemetery, and it all went to this ridiculous building that he made. And, it was just, he really pillaged the country. And so I was really excited to talk to the woman. How did you make it through that? And these women suffer profoundly. So basically back then, if you wanted to be a visual artist, the only way you had access to real brushes that didn't immediately fall apart as soon as they made contact with paint, to have actual canvases, to have a shot at a studio, the only way to do that was to literally paint this man's face or his wife's face or something like uplifting of Romania and the Romanian state, right? And so the artists I interviewed, they refused to do this. And so they just became so incredibly creative. One of the women that I interviewed, Marilena Breda-Sank, she was part of the postcard art movement. And so what they would do is they would just get these little tiny postcards, and she once painted herself. No, it was actually a nude photo with her face covered. A nude photo, and she got a little black Sharpie and made little lines like that looked like she was imprisoned. And she wrote in, an art gallery in Paris that she saw in a magazine once. This is like pre-internet, right? So, a magazine from the West was just the portal into this whole universe, right? And so then, at night when no one's following her, she would just stick it into the, post office. And so artists all over Romania are doing this constantly. And so, a lot of them get stopped, but some of them make it through. And that's the only way that artists were actually able to, these kinds of artists were able to actually show their work, right? So it's just basically, the thing is, what I've learned is that the creative energy you have, your extraordinary talent to be creative as an artist is what is going to enable you to survive an authoritarian regime. It is going to be what is going to enable you to survive war, genocide, famine, all of these various things. That's why it's so incredibly important that we teach young people how to be deeply creative, because it will save your life. Not only will it save your interior life, but it can also save your actual limbs, right? Because you become creative in every aspect of your being. I also learned from these incredible mujeres all around the land that artists always find a way.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
And now let's create for a moment. I'm going to invite folks to put in the chat the answers to who I am, what do I want to do, and what are the tools to do that. And that's how we're going to wrap up the session with
Beautiful.
gratitude for Stephanie's just beautiful book. The book is Art Above Everything. And if you don't have it yet, please go get it right now and enjoy it. Thank you so much. And please, we invite folks in the Zoom room to put in the chat the answers to those questions.
Beautiful. So just a little setup for this prompt. This was by Mama Miherangi. So Mama Miherangi is this extraordinary Maori singer, musician, composer. And she had also chosen the art monk life, constantly choosing art at every turn, and really found herself in deep financial straits as a result of this, and things were really going difficult for her. And so she had this moment where she's like, okay, and she just found herself asking herself these questions. And so the first answer to the question is, who am I? I'm Maori. What do I want to do? I want to sing. What are my tools to do that? I need to use my culture. And so then she completely remade herself and really leaned into being Maori. This was, an indigenous community that had been suppressed, oppressed, repressed for so many decades. Now she's in full regalia when she's performing. Now she sings in Maori. She speaks in Maori, no matter who the audience is. She doesn't feel the need to translate, right? She's just this powerhouse, all completely embodied Maori, and all of her dancers, backup dancers, are Maori, and they're doing it. They rap and they do like beatbox and loop pedals, and so they're using like new technology to channel the ancestral spirit, and it's extraordinary. So,
and you should Google it because it
yes.
is a sight to behold. Thank you so much, and I'm gonna pass it over to our comadres. Thank you.
I pass it over to our comadre. Do you mean me?
Yes.
Yes, I mean
Thank
you, Nora.
Thank you so much. I didn't know where we were going next with it. I'm so engrossed in the interview that I'm like, who, me? Hello, everybody. Okay, slow down, take a deep breath. Truly, what an amazing evening. Thank you so, so much. Our heartfelt gratitude to our authors and their publishers, Sourcebook, LLC, Caridad Pineiro, and Beacon Press, for generously donating books to our early registrants. And special thanks to our incredible interviewers. Comadre Maria, it just felt so comfortable for you. I mean, it was conversation amazing. Lourdes, your questions were spot on to really bring soul into everything that was being asked and talked about. I know if you don't have these books, you're going to run right out and buy them, because I guarantee you will not regret it. We appreciate our audience for joining us tonight and submitting thoughtful questions. Most importantly, we want to recognize our dedicated volunteers, without whom this book club and its associated work would not be possible. Mil gracias de todo corazón. Supporting Latina authors is critical, crucial to our mission. We encourage you to write reviews on platforms like Amazon, Goodreads, Barnes & Noble, as these reviews significantly impact publishers and potential readers. And if you're scared about writing one and you don't know what to do, run over to Latino website, because we've got examples there. Consider purchasing books to directly support our authors. And if your local library lacks the title you're interested in, don't hesitate to request that they order it. We invite you to attend our virtual local book club meetings and bring friends along. Really, you won't regret it. The conversations are amazing. Join us, because I know you all want to talk about the stuff you heard today, and you're like, oh my God, I can't, who can I talk to? Well, come to book club and you'll have a chance to talk about these books. Also, remember, our book club is open to men and women, Latinos and non-Latinos. All are welcome. Looking ahead, our September books are The Bewitching by Silvia Moreno Garcia, and Ramas y Raíces, The Best of Calma by Mario H. Acevedo Karen Gonzalez, Amy Medina Carr, and Anita Jepson Gilbert, and Kimberly Sanchez. Thanks to all of you for your continued support of our Comadres and Friends National Latino Book Club. You know we're going to be 20 years old next year. Please join us in celebrating Las Comadres and Friends National Latino Book Club by buying books and supporting Latino authors. Let's applaud and amplify diverse literary voices throughout the year. Good night, and always read Latino Lit.